Dominic Moretti didn't believe in miracles, but standing in his Chicago penthouse at 2:47 a.m. with blood still wet on his cufflinks, the housekeeper blocking his path looked like divine intervention. Elena Carter pressed her finger urgently to her lips, her eyes screaming a single word: silence. In Dominic's world, people cleared his path or paid the price. He'd spent 15 years building an empire where his whisper carried more weight than other men's screams, where his name alone made grown men confess to crimes they hadn't committed. Yet something in this woman's expression, raw terror wrapped around steel determination, made him obey without question. "What's happening in my house?" His voice came out deadly quiet, the tone that preceded violence. Elena grabbed his arm with surprising force, pulling him toward the shadows near the grand piano. "If Victoria hears you now, everything I've protected will be lost." Victoria, his fiancée, the woman who was supposed to unite two warring crime families, who smiled at him over morning coffee and tucked his children into bed. Dominic had spent the evening at the docks handling a negotiation that had required 3 bullets and a body bag, carrying guilt that weighed more than the Glock at his spine. He'd come home early for once, hoping to see Lucas and Sophia before they slept. From somewhere in the penthouse's depths, he heard it, a child's whimper, quickly muffled. Lucas or Sophia, he couldn't tell, but neither should be awake at this hour. Elena's hand pressed against his chest. 60 seconds. Trust me for 60 seconds. No one called him Dominic anymore. His soldiers said boss. His enemies said Moretti like a curse. Even Victoria preferred darling in that honey-sweet voice. But Elena said his name like it was a prayer, like she was calling him back from the edge of something terrible. They moved through darkness he knew by heart, past the imported marble pillars, around the antique credenza, through air that smelled of expensive bourbon and old money. Elena positioned him behind a column with the precision of a soldier, then pointed toward the children's playroom. Through the doorway, Dominic saw his daughter kneeling on the Persian rug his wife had chosen before cancer took her. Sophia's small shoulders shook silently. Lucas stood beside her like a prisoner awaiting execution, hands clasped, face blank in a way no 7-year-olds should be. And towering over them both in designer heels and a silk robe Dominic had bought her in Milan was Victoria Santoro. "You think crying will fix anything, Sophia?" Victoria's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Your father isn't here. He's never really here, is he? And when he is, he's too weak to do what needs to be done with children like you." Dominic's vision narrowed, his pulse roaring in his ears. "Weak, damaged children become dead weight," Victoria continued, circling Sophia like a predator. "In my family, we eliminate dead weight before it drags us down. You should be grateful I'm teaching you discipline instead of doing what my father suggested." She crouched to Sophia's eye level, perfectly manicured nails catching the light. "Now tell me what you are, little girl. Say it clearly." Sophia's voice came out barely above a whisper, broken and small. "Worthless." That single word detonated in Dominic's chest like a grenade, shredding everything he thought he knew about his life. If you're listening to this and feel something tighten in your chest, something that recognizes the weight of failing the people who need you most, take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Like and share this story so we can continue bringing these raw, honest narratives to light every single day. And if you're willing, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We want to know which corners of the world this story has reached, because every comment reminds us why these stories matter. Elena pulled Dominic away from the doorway before he could move, before he could break Victoria Santoro into pieces small enough to fit in the Chicago River. Her grip on his arm was iron-tight, desperate. In the kitchen, away from the playroom where his children were learning to hate themselves, she released him and pulled a phone from her apron pocket. "I've been documenting everything," she whispered, her fingers trembling as she unlocked the screen. "Hidden cameras. For months of footage. You need to see it all before you do something that gets them killed." The phone's glow illuminated her face in harsh blue light. She pressed play. The first video was dated 3 weeks ago. Same playroom, different nightmare. Lucas sat at the craft table, his school project spread before him. A family tree assignment Dominic vaguely remembered signing a permission slip for. Victoria's voice came through the speaker with crystalline clarity. Useless. That's what you are, Lucas. You can't even glue construction paper correctly. The camera caught Lucas's face crumpling. 7 years old and trying not to cry. Your mother would be ashamed of how weak you turned out. She died giving birth to weakness. Dominic's hand shot out to steady himself against the counter. Elena didn't stop the video. I'm sorry, Lucas whispered on screen. The words Dominic had heard 100 times at breakfast, at dinner, whispered apologies for existing. I'll do better. You're a mistake, Victoria said, walking out of frame. Your father knows it. Why do you think he's never home? Elena swiped to the second video. This one was from the children's bathroom 2 months ago. Sophia stood in front of the mirror in her princess pajamas while Victoria gripped her arm. Fingers digging into pale skin hard enough to leave marks Dominic had never noticed, had never thought to look for. Say it, Victoria commanded. Say what you are. I am worthless. Sophia's tiny voice cracked on the second word. Again. I am worthless. Louder. The third video made Dominic's vision blur. Storage closet. Both children huddled together in darkness, visible only because Elena had installed a camera with night vision. Lucas had his arms around Sophia, whispering that it would be okay, that Daddy would come home soon. The timestamp showed 4 hours. 4 hours locked in darkness because they'd asked Victoria when their father would be back from his business trip to New York. Elena fast-forwarded through dozens of clips. September, October, November, December, a catalog of systematic destruction. Victoria was holding meals. Victoria telling Lucas his mother killed herself to escape him. Victoria making Sophia stand in the corner for hours because she'd laughed too loudly. Victoria, 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 the woman who kissed Dominic goodbye every morning, who planned their wedding with his mother's ring on her finger, who was supposed to be the peace treaty that ended decades of bloodshed between the Moretti and Santoro families. The phone shook in Dominic's hands, and he realized with distant horror that he was the one shaking. His hands, the same hands that had broken bones and ended lives without trembling, couldn't hold a phone steady. Why didn't they tell me? His voice came out broken, unrecognizable. Elena's eyes filled with tears she'd probably been holding back for months. Because she made them believe you wouldn't care, that you'd choose her over them. She told them you only kept them out of obligation, that you regretted having children at all. She paused, let that sink in. She made them believe their father was the monster, Mr. Moretti. Not her. Dominic looked at the phone still playing in his shaking hands, at his daughter's face on screen, and understood that he'd spent 15 years building an empire while failing at the only thing that mattered. He'd protected Chicago's underworld, but not his own children sleeping 30 feet away. Why didn't you show me this before? Dominic's voice came out raw, accusatory. Weeks of this. Months. You watched my children suffer and said nothing. Elena flinched but didn't look away. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of grief that had calcified into something harder. Because the last person who tried to show you ended up dead, Mr. Moretti. My sister learned that lesson for both of us. The kitchen seemed to tilt. Your sister, Rachel Carter. Elena pulled a second phone from her pocket. This one older, the screen cracked. Your children's nanny. 3 years ago. You remember her. Dominic did, suddenly and vividly. Rachel Carter had been young, maybe 26, with kind eyes and a laugh that made Lucas giggle even months after his mother's death. She'd been good with the children, patient in ways Dominic couldn't manage through his grief. Then one morning Victoria had told him Rachel quit suddenly. Family emergency, already gone. Victoria had a replacement ready. Her cousin's friend, Elena, who came with impeccable references. Another lie in a life built on them. Rachel discovered what Victoria was doing to Lucas and Sophia 2 months into the engagement. Elena continued, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. She came to me terrified, said she'd seen bruises, heard things. She was going to report it, go to you directly. Elena's hand trembled as she pulled up a police report on the damaged phone. 3 days later, her car went off Lakeshore Drive at 2 in the morning. Brake failure. They ruled it accidental. The report was dated February 17th, 3 years ago. Dominic scanned the details with a prosecutor's eye, the kind of eye that had kept him ahead of federal investigations for 15 years. Witness statements mentioned another vehicle, a dark SUV that didn't stop. Those statements had been marked unsubstantiated and buried in supplemental pages most investigators would never read. I couldn't prove it then, Elena said. I was just a paralegal who'd lost her sister. Nobody cared. But I knew the Santoros had killed her, and I knew why. She swiped to photographs, brake lines cut clean, not frayed. Took me 18 months to get these from the impound lot. Another 6 months to trace the mechanic's employment records back to Antonio Santoro's legitimate businesses. Dominic looked at this woman he'd barely noticed for 3 years. She'd served him coffee every morning, cleaned his home, and smiled politely when Victoria gave her orders. All while carrying evidence of her sister's murder, while documenting a conspiracy, while standing between his children and the woman who'd killed to keep her secrets. You took this job knowing they'd murdered Rachel, he said slowly. Knowing they'd kill you too if they found out. Lucas was 4 years old. Sophia was 2. Elena's voice broke on their names. Rachel's last words to me were about them. She said, those babies deserve better than this world, Elena. Someone has to protect them. She met his eyes with devastating clarity. So I became someone. I became their housekeeper, their shadow, their evidence collector. I became the person Rachel couldn't be. In Dominic's world, loyalty was bought with money or fear. His soldiers followed orders because he paid them well or because they understood the cost of betrayal. But Elena Carter had walked into a house with her sister's killer, had spent 3 years gathering evidence one hidden camera at a time, and had risked everything for children who didn't even know her real name. You're braver than any soldier I've ever commanded, Dominic said quietly. Elena's laugh was bitter. Brave would have been going to the police 3 years ago. I was just too afraid to let Rachel's death mean nothing. She glanced toward the playroom where Victoria had finally gone silent. And too afraid that if I moved too fast, Lucas and Sophia would end up like her. Another convenient accident nobody questioned. Dominic understood then what he was looking at. Not his housekeeper, but a woman who'd turned grief into a weapon and wielded it for 3 years without flinching. Rachel Carter's ghost had been protecting his children all along. Elena reached into the cabinet beneath the sink, past cleaning supplies Dominic knew she never stored there, and pulled out a third phone. This one was wrapped in plastic, sealed like evidence. The abuse wasn't the endgame, she said, unlocking it with shaking fingers. It was just the setup. The screen filled with bank transfers. Dominic recognized the routing numbers immediately, offshore accounts, the kind he used himself. But these flowed from Antonio Santoro's holding companies to Victoria's private accounts. 50,000 in September. 75 in October. 100,000 2 weeks ago. Each transaction labeled with the same memo. Project Succession. Succession, Dominic repeated, the word tasting like poison. Elena swiped to encrypted messages she'd somehow intercepted. Probably the same way she'd hidden cameras throughout his penthouse, through patience and invisible competence. The texts between Victoria and her father read like a military operation. AS. Timeline? VS. Complications responsive to method discussed. Inheritance path clears within 90 days. AS. Legal framework ready. Ensure documentation supports incapacity claim. VS. Grief and neglect narrative established. Children's therapist already noting father's absence in sessions. Dominic's blood turned to ice. Lucas and Sophia had been seeing a therapist for 6 months. Victoria's idea, to help them process their mother's death. Another manipulation. Another piece of evidence being constructed. "Keep reading," Elena whispered. Medical research filled the next screen. Victoria had downloaded articles about childhood poisoning, symptoms that mimicked leukemia, autoimmune disorders, mysterious illnesses that baffled doctors until it was too late. Search histories showing her interest in substances that left minimal forensic traces. "Last Tuesday," Elena said, pulling a small evidence bag from the same cabinet. A package arrived for Victoria. "I intercepted it before she came home." Inside the bag were 2 small vials, clear liquid that could have been water. Antifreeze mixed with artificial sweetener. Masks the bitter taste. Causes kidney failure that looks like pediatric illness. Takes weeks to kill. Dominic had ordered deaths. He understood violence in its purest form, quick, clean, purposeful. But this was something else. This was systematic erasure disguised as tragedy. A murder so patient it masqueraded as fate. "The legal documents are already filed with Cook County," Elena continued, showing him paperwork that made his stomach turn. Petitions declaring him an unfit parent. Psychiatric evaluations forged, probably suggesting emotional instability and neglect. Testimony from household staff about his frequent absences, his violent temper, his inability to cope after his wife's death. Antonio's lawyers are ready to move the moment Lucas and Sophia get sick. They'll argue you're too grief-stricken to make medical decisions, that you need to step aside for their well-being. And then the Santoro family controls your empire through conservatorship while you're declared incompetent. Your children die of tragic illness within the year. Victoria inherits as your grieving widow. Your entire organization gets absorbed into their operation. Elena's voice hardened. The engagement was never about peace, Mr. Moretti. It was a hostile takeover. Victoria specifically targeted a widower with young children because you were vulnerable. Because children make acceptable casualties. Elena checked her watch, a nervous gesture Dominic had never seen her make before. It's 3:15. Victoria's at the Drake Hotel with her father and his lieutenants. They're finalizing the poisoning schedule, discussing how to accelerate the timeline now that you're back in town more often. How do you know that? The bartender at the Drake owes me favors. Elena's smile was grim. Turns out I'm not the only person the Santoros have hurt. Victoria won't be back until after 6 a.m. Maybe later if the meeting runs long. 3 hours, Mr. Moretti. That's what we have to decide. 3 hours to choose between everything he built and the 2 people who mattered more than all of it combined. You have 2 options, Elena said, her voice dropping to the tone of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in her head. We can disappear tonight. I have fake passports. Good ones, not the garbage you can buy in Chinatown. I have a contact in witness protection who owes me his life from before I came here. We take Lucas and Sophia. We drive to a safe house in Wisconsin, and by sunrise you're all ghosts. Or you expose everything. Go to the FBI, the media, whoever will listen. Risk a war between your family and the Santoros, knowing that wars like that don't care about collateral damage. She met his eyes with brutal honesty. Your children become targets either way. The question is whether they're targets in hiding or targets in the crossfire. Dominic walked away from her, his feet carrying him down the hallway he'd walked 1,000 times without really seeing. Lucas's door was cracked open the way he liked it, afraid of the dark in ways he'd never admit. The night light from Sophia's room spilled across the carpet in a thin line of yellow. He pushed Lucas's door wider. His son lay curled under the blankets. Clutching the brown teddy bear Maria had given him 2 days before the cancer took her. Lucas's face was peaceful in sleep, innocent in a way it never was during waking hours. 7 years old and already learning to apologize for existing, to make himself smaller, to flinch when someone moved too quickly near him. Sophia's room smelled like the lavender spray Victoria insisted on using. Another detail that would haunt him now. Princess stickers covered the walls, a constellation of dreams that should have been safe. His daughter slept with her arms wrapped around a pillow, her blonde hair fanned across sheets Victoria had chosen. Everything in this room had been touched by the woman trying to kill her. These were children who smiled nervously at him during breakfast, who said, "Yes, sir," instead of, "Yes, Daddy," who flinched when he tried to hug them goodnight. He'd thought it was grief. He'd thought they blamed him for their mother's death, for his absences, for not being enough. They'd been trying to survive. Dominic pulled his phone from his pocket with hands that had finally stopped shaking. The rage had crystallized into something colder, more useful. He scrolled to a number he'd stored years ago under emergency only. A joke. Since Dominic Moretti didn't have emergencies he couldn't handle himself. FBI Special Agent Marcus Chun answered on the second ring. Voice alert despite the hour. "Who is this?" "Chun," Dominic said quietly, watching his daughter sleep. "It's Moretti. I want to make a deal. Full testimony about my organization, the Santoros, every dirty cop and corrupt politician on both payrolls. Everything." He paused, let that sink in. "But first, I need witness protection for 3 people, and I need it in the next 2 hours." The silence on the other end lasted 3 heartbeats. "I'm listening," Chin said. The diner on South Halstead had been closed for 6 months. Windows papered over with foreclosure notices. Dominic knew the owner still owed him money, enough that the man had handed over keys without questions when called at 3:30 in the morning. Now Dominic sat in a booth that smelled like old grease and broken dreams. Elena across from him, both of them waiting for the man who'd spent a decade trying to destroy everything Dominic had built. Agent Marcus Chen arrived in 43 minutes, alone as instructed. He was younger than Dominic expected for someone with his reputation, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and the kind of exhaustion that came from fighting losing battles. He slid into the booth with his hand near his weapon, skepticism carved into every line of his face. "This is a trap," Chun said flatly. Dominic slid Elena's phone across the table. "Watch." Chen's expression shifted as the first video played. Then the second. By the third, his jaw had tightened in a way that suggested he had children of his own. When Victoria's voice commanded Sophia to call herself worthless, Chun closed his eyes briefly. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "I'll give you everything," Dominic said. "Complete testimony about my operations. Every business, every deal, every body. The Santoro family, their political connections, their trafficking routes. Every corrupt cop from here to Springfield. Every politician on both our payrolls." He leaned forward. "I'll burn it all down, Chin. Everything I spent 15 years building. But I need 3 things first."
"I'm listening."
Immunity for Elena Carter. She installed surveillance without consent, intercepted communications, technically broke a dozen laws gathering this evidence. She walks free. Chun nodded slowly. "Second, witness protection for me and my children. New identities, new city, the full program. And third, immediate arrest warrants for Victoria Santoro and her father Antonio. I want them in custody before sunrise, before they can retaliate or run." Chun pulled out his phone, made 3 calls while Dominic and Elena sat in silence that felt like drowning. Through the papered windows, Chicago's skyline glowed in the distance. The city Dominic had controlled from the shadows, the empire he was about to surrender. "It's over," he said quietly to Elena. "Everything I built. My reputation, my organization, my name. By tomorrow, I'll be a ghost." Elena's hand covered his, a gesture so unexpected he almost pulled away. "You're choosing to be their father instead of their king. That's not losing everything, Mr. Moretti. That's finally understanding what matters." "Your sister," Dominic said. "Rachel. What were her last words to you?" Elena's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for 3 years. She said, "Those kids deserve better than this world, Elena. Someone has to fight for better. I thought she meant I had to fight alone. She glanced at the phone, still showing frozen footage of his children. I'm glad I was wrong. Chun returned, his expression grim but determined. You've got approval. Federal prosecutors are drafting immunity agreements now. Marshals are moving into position for protective custody. We'll have arrest teams ready to move on the Santoros within the hour. He paused. But we've got a problem. My contact at the Drake just called. Victoria left the hotel 20 minutes ago. She's heading to your penthouse. Dominic checked his watch. 4:47 a.m. They'd run out of time. Then we go now, he said, standing. Before she gets there. Before she realizes what's coming. Chun grabbed his arm. If this goes wrong, then my children wake up to their father protecting them for once. Dominic's voice was steel. Let's move. They made it back to the penthouse with 4 minutes to spare. Dominic's hands were steady now, purposeful as he moved through the hallway toward his children's rooms. Elena followed close behind, her phone already recording. Lucas woke first, his eyes snapping open with the alertness of a child who'd learned to be afraid of being woken unexpectedly. Are we in trouble? The resignation in his 7-year-old voice broke something in Dominic's chest.
No, Buddy.
You're not in trouble. Sophia stirred in the adjacent room, immediately sitting up and stammering. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Stop. Dominic knelt between their beds, making himself small, unthreatening. His children flinched anyway. Listen to me, both of you. You're not in trouble. You've never been in trouble. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you, but I'm protecting you now. Lucas's lower lip trembled. From Victoria? Yes, from Victoria. The sound of the penthouse door opening echoed through the marble foyer. Elena moved instantly, gathering both children into her arms and carrying them toward Dominic's office where the panic room was hidden behind a bookshelf. Reinforced steel disguised as mahogany, built for emergencies he'd never imagined would look like this. Stay silent, Elena whispered to the children as she activated the room's recording system, then pulled the door shut behind them. Dominic walked into the living room just as Victoria entered, still dressed in the black designer dress she'd worn to meet her father. Her smile was perfect, practiced, the one that had fooled him for 18 months. Darling, you're home early. Her voice dripped honey. How was business? I know everything, Victoria. Dominic kept his distance, his voice flat. The abuse, the poison, your father's plan to take my empire. For one heartbeat, Victoria's mask held. Then it shattered. Her laugh was cold, genuinely amused. Everything? You don't know anything, Dominic. You've never known anything except how to break things. She dropped her purse on the couch, utterly unconcerned. What are you going to do? Kill me? My father will burn this city to the ground looking for you. Those worthless brats will never be safe, no matter where you hide them. The poison, Dominic said. Tell me about the poison. Victoria's smile turned savage. Antifreeze. Sweet enough that even stupid children won't taste it in their juice. 3 weeks, maybe 4, and they'd be dead. Tragic childhood illness. Grief-stricken father declared incompetent. Santoro family takes control through emergency conservatorship. She stepped closer, emboldened by his stillness. You were so easy, Dominic. A lonely widower with baggage? My father saw the opportunity before you even knew my name. The engagement was never about peace. It was about acquisition. And the abuse? Breaking them down first. Easier to poison compliant children. Easier to make their deaths look like surrender to illness rather than murder. Victoria's eyes glittered with malice. They were dead weight anyway. Your precious Lucas and Sophia, weak, sniveling mistakes that should have died with their mother. I don't need to kill you, Dominic said quietly. I just needed you to confess. Victoria's expression flickered, the first hint of uncertainty. The penthouse door exploded inward. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded the living room, weapons drawn. Victoria ran, her heels skittering on marble as she made for the balcony. Agent Chun tackled her in the hallway, slamming her against the wall as two other agents secured her wrists with handcuffs. "You're dead!" Victoria screamed, thrashing as they dragged her toward the door. "You're dead, Moretti. Your children are dead. My father will." Chun shoved her forward, cutting off the threats. "Victoria Santoro, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, child abuse, and racketeering." The panic room door opened. Elena emerged first, shielding Lucas and Sophia from the chaos. Her phone was still recording, capturing Victoria's final screaming threats as the FBI hauled her into the elevator. Dominic knelt and opened his arms. For the first time in months, his children didn't flinch. They ran to him. By sunrise, the penthouse had transformed into a federal crime scene. FBI technicians photographed everything. The hidden cameras Elena had installed, the children's rooms where abuse had festered in silence, the kitchen where Victoria had stored poison meant for two innocent lives. Agent Chun coordinated from the living room, his phone pressed to his ear as he orchestrated raids across the city. At 6:47 a.m., Antonio Santoro was arrested at his Lake Forest estate along with 6 of his top lieutenants. By 7:15, news helicopters circled the Moretti penthouse. By 8 o'clock, every channel in Chicago ran the same headline: Moretti turned state's witness in massive RICO case. Dominic watched the coverage from a secure federal facility on the outskirts of Cook County. Lucas and Sophia sat on a couch beside him, still in their pajamas, clutching the stuffed animals Elena had thought to grab during the chaos. Trauma specialists had evaluated them both, confirmed what Dominic already knew. Years of systematic psychological abuse. Trust shattered so completely it might never fully heal. "Are you leaving us too?" Sophia asked Elena, her small voice barely audible. Elena knelt before her, taking both tiny hands in her own. "I'm staying as long as you need me, sweetheart. Promise. I'm not going anywhere." Lucas hadn't spoken since they'd left the penthouse. He sat rigid, his 7-year-old face far too serious, watching his father with eyes that held more questions than trust. Finally, he asked what Dominic had been dreading. "Why didn't you see what she was doing?" The room went quiet. Elena started to intervene, but Dominic raised his hand. "Because I was too busy being powerful to notice I was failing at being a father." The words tasted like ash, but they were true. "I was so focused on protecting my empire, on being feared, on controlling things that didn't matter, that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me." He turned to face Lucas fully. "But I see you now, both of you, and I'm never looking away again." Lucas's lower lip trembled. "Do you promise?" "I promise." It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a beginning. 3 days later, paperwork came through with new identities. David Morrison, Laura Morrison. The children would keep their first names. The psychologists insisted on that much continuity. Elena became Elena Morrison, listed as their legal guardian alongside Dominic. Their old lives were being systematically erased, replaced with backstories and documentation that would let them disappear into ordinary American life. On their last afternoon in Chicago, Dominic took Lucas and Sophia to Graceland Cemetery where their mother was buried. Elena drove but stayed by the car, giving them space while remaining close enough to provide safety. Maria Moretti's headstone was simple granite, exactly as she'd requested before the cancer took her. Dominic knelt between his children, his hands on their shoulders. "Your mother," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "was the kindest person I ever knew. She laughed at terrible jokes. She sang off-key in the shower. She made the best chocolate chip cookies. And she loved you both more than anything in this world." "Victoria said Mommy didn't want us," Sophia whispered. "Victoria Lid." Dominic pulled his daughter close. "Your mother wanted you so much that she kept fighting even when the doctor said she should stop. She held you both the day before she died and made me promise to always protect you. His voice broke. I broke that promise. But I'm making it again now, and this time I'll keep it. Lucas touched the headstone with tentative fingers. Tell us more about her. The real things. So Dominic did. He told them about Maria's terrible singing, her love of old movies, how she'd met their father when she was just a college student with dreams bigger than Chicago. He told them stories Victoria had poisoned, reclaiming memories that belonged to his children. When they finally left, Lucas took his hand without being asked. It was enough. 6 months later, at the coastal town of Cannon Beach, Oregon, the people didn't know that David Morrison had once controlled Chicago's underworld. They knew him as the quiet security consultant who'd moved into the blue cottage on Hemlock Street, the one who coached his son's soccer team and always showed up early to parent-teacher conferences. Dominic still thought of himself as Dominic, though he answered to David now. Elena had kept her first name. The psychologist said some continuity helped the children, but became Elena Morrison in all the paperwork that mattered. She was listed as their legal guardian alongside him, a family built from survival rather than blood. Lucas and Sophia attended Cannon Beach Elementary. Twice weekly therapy sessions helped them process trauma that would take years to fully heal. But Lucas smiled again. Genuine smiles that reached his eyes when he talked about dinosaurs or showed off the soccer trophy his team had won last month. Sophia drew pictures constantly, covering their refrigerator with crayon images of their house by the ocean, of the three of them and Elena building sandcastles, of a life without fear. The trial had concluded in February. Victoria Santoro received life without parole. Her father Antonio got the same, along with RICO charges that dismantled his empire piece by piece. The Chicago News still covered the aftermath occasionally. Other crime families fighting over territory, the power vacuum creating chaos Dominic had once controlled. He didn't miss it. Not the way he'd expected to. Late one evening, Dominic stood on their modest porch watching the Pacific Ocean darken under twilight. Elena joined him with 2 cups of coffee, settling into the chair beside his. Do you miss it? She asked quietly. The power? The empire? Through the window, Dominic could see Lucas teaching Sophia a card game at the kitchen table. Both children were laughing, their voices carrying through the screen door like music he was still learning to appreciate. Lucas was patient, explaining the rules twice when Sophia got confused. Sophia was animated, her hands gesturing wildly as she talked about a project at school. Every single day, Dominic admitted. The honesty felt strange but necessary. I missed the control, the respect, knowing I could change things with a phone call. He took a sip of coffee. But I'd burn it all down again. I'd burn down 1,000 empires for this. Elena's eyes glistened. Rachel would be proud. Not of what I've done. She'd probably yell at me for the risks I took. She smiled through tears. But she'd be proud of what they're becoming. Who they're becoming. They're becoming themselves, Dominic said. Not the broken things Victoria tried to make them. He went inside, drawn by the sound of his children's laughter. Lucas looked up as he approached, no longer flinching at sudden movement. Dad, wanna play? Sophia's getting good. Dominic sat between them at the table. A simple wooden thing from a thrift store, nothing like the imported marble furniture he'd once surrounded himself with. When he reached out to ruffle Lucas's hair, his son leaned into the touch instead of pulling away. Sophia abandoned the card game to climb into his lap, chattering about tomorrow's plans. Can we go fishing? You promised we could try the pier. We can go fishing, Dominic confirmed. As Sophia's chatter slowed and she drifted towards sleep against his shoulder, as Lucas dealt another hand of cards with the casual contentment of a child who felt safe, Dominic found himself frozen. Not in fear this time, but in gratitude so profound it felt like drowning in the best possible way. He was afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid the spell of ordinary happiness might shatter if he acknowledged it too directly. Elena Carter had said, "Stay silent," on a blood-stained night 6 months ago, and in obeying that command, Dominic Moretti had discovered something he'd spent 15 years missing: the simple, devastating power of being present when your children needed you most. In the quiet of that coastal evening, the man who once ruled through violence and fear finally understood what it meant to be truly powerful, and it was having family around. This story is a subtle reminder that it is never too late to change, that the past, no matter how dark, does not have to define the future, that love can always grow in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes losing everything is the very way we discover what truly matters. The greatest lesson this story offers is the value of family and the power of choice. Dominic was a man that once had everything: power, wealth, respect. Yet, he nearly lost what was most precious in his life simply because he was not there when his children needed him. A busy life can sometimes make us forget that the people we love need our presence more than anything else in the world. Make time for your family. Listen to your children. And remember that no success is ever worth it if we lose the ones we love along the way. If this story has touched your heart, if you see yourself or someone you cherish reflected in these characters, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next emotional stories to come. Do not forget to like and share this video with the people you love, because sometimes a single story can change the way we look at life. Leave a comment below so that we can talk, share, and connect with one another through these life stories. Thank you for spending your time with us today. We wish all of you watching this video a Merry Christmas, good health, a joyful life, and daily peace of mind. Always cherish the people beside you, for they are the greatest treasure you will ever have. Goodbye for now, and we look forward to seeing you again in the next.